right.
Right. We just went through our slides and we're feeling like that there were places that were really, really technical. And then I'm just gonna look to one of you.
Please do.
What else would you like to say about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be prepared.
And I think particularly the ones we hit were economically disadvantaged and digital equity. I think it might have been the two places where we were both like, yeah, that's a lot of words that we don't know.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to those. And then also, ELL and immigrant. Cause Amy Michalik
Not
isn't
here?
coming today.
Oh,
She was here yesterday.
she sent me a message saying like, are you doing my choice slides? I'm like, if it's, yeah, and then I don't know what.
So I don't know if I should speak to ELL and immigrant. I'm happy to do that. I did a whole presentation yesterday doing a lot of this. And what do you think, Amy? We're gonna hear from Amy.
And I think the other thing is there is a lot of content on the slide, on the deck, and I think
Yeah.
I need to say.
Did not cover every little detail.
Yeah, to say these are slides that.
Yeah.
We had, our presenter wasn't able to join us, so we're just skipping them, but if you have questions, you can jump.
Right, right.
I'll speak to what I can. I mean, really the big piece of EL is that it's underreported. And that the title consultations, like a lot of school districts are actually skipping that piece of title
Oh,
because they're not confident and not aware
uh-huh.
of how to have that, navigate that conversation. Okay.
Yeah, I
So-
feel strong that you should say at least that, if we don't have any.
Yeah.
if we don't have
Yeah.
time
Right.
To cover,
You feel strongly what?
that you should say at least that.
Yeah.
Confident in that.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that comes right after us.
Yeah, when does it come? Is it in the beginning before ancestry?
You know,
It's too much.
I may feel, look at me. for the
Right.
immigrants and, yeah, I mean,
Right.
you see my body twitching.
But you're ready to say something?
We need a safe word.
You have an opinion?
Peanut butter.
One of the, two of the side effects of ketamine are cross-eyed and jerky bodies.
Yes, that's me.
And it was
Immigrant.
like, Shai's like, am I jerking yet?
Yeah.
Am I cross-eyed?
Definitely,
Because you're gonna want to jump in and say something?
yeah,
Perfect.
but only, yeah.
Only if you feel so compelled if the spirit moves you. And then immigrant.
So, Dimitri was supposed to be here, but he's not, right?
I have no idea. I should probably chat him. He has not been in.
Didn't think he was.
He said he would, but
Oh, right.
a long time ago. He said.
Oh, okay.
Do you think it's worth me reaching out to him and asking him if he's coming?
So, yeah, he said he was. I don't have, to us to set up. Physically.
Just take a seat.
I think sit wherever and then we just
You're gonna be
play
there.
empty chair.
I can be standing.
I think we have more than space.
How is that slide on the screen, but it's this one?
Because I have the PowerPoint open. This is the actual presentation.
Got it. Okay.
But I'm
Okay.
gonna move my mouse to minimize this. He's marked out of office online. I don't know.
Okay.
That could be so many things.
It could be.
Right?
Is he here? Is he there? We don't know. Does anyone want to wear a lapel? Or whatever these are called?
I don't care which.
for like people that have preferences. If you're
I can do one. I can do anything.
preferences for my.
Handheld about a year.
Yeah. I was like,
Okay.
I'm wondering, because Courtney, you and I have the most, so do you want to just get set up with the lapel and then we can all share mines?
Sure. I was thinking, yeah, either Courtney or Ananda should wear the lavalier.
And we have the soft drinks for legs too. That's true.
Aw,
oh, Courtney, that's all.
the softest voice and the hardest punch.
This is perfect. You says, be kind, and then it drops down of a bitch. It's like,
It took me a minute to process. I was like,
I am really kind. Yeah.
sure. Okay. Okay. I hear you. That's funny. Yeah, I guess I'm slime heavy too. That took a solid 5 minutes for me to process. Mhm. So what did Gabby say about who's gonna, they said Heidi's gonna. walk
No.
around while I'm presenting?
No. Actually, she jokingly said Michelle was gonna do all of your choice presentations.
There we go.
And Michelle said, no, 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 no.
Why not?
And, Courtney pointed out was that in the past few sessions that the people didn't do much, like, just didn't.
And it can be introspective, you know, they can
Yeah.
just jot
They didn't
something
want
to themselves.
Yeah, well, I had John and I mean, the session that was really designed to be interactive.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
Emily Cole and Jen.
Oh, right.
I've never met John.
I've never met him in person. It was yesterday was my question. And then I had 2 sessions. Yeah, like, hey, buddy.
Yeah. I think today's the first day I've met another person.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Both of you.
Here we are in the flesh.
Actually,
Right.
I think for
All of
me,
us.
I mean, I know Christine. During COVID.
oh,
Yeah, we were gorgeous at that, including each other.
you're the only girl. Who knew each other before tonight?
We've seen each other in person. before
I've worked
today.
with Sam virtually and with Christine virtually on stuff, but I think you're relatively new, so I haven't worked with you yet. Oh, well.
Go way back. She gave me a birthday party.
Good afternoon. We're going to be beginning in about 1 minute. We're excited you're here. After lunch, don't fall asleep yet. Good afternoon or good morning.
I
Okay.
was gonna respond, I don't
Like,
know.
sometime in the beginning, I thought see it. Just for the, yeah, that's, what do you want out of this?
Okay.
Rock and roll.
All right, everybody, we're going to get started. This is the Equity in Data session. Welcome. My name is Kina Stringfellow. I'm the technical writer on the customer services team. Myself and my colleague, Carrie Bow, who is the, what's your title?
Wise Improvement Manager.
All right, also on the customer services team. We presented the session last year, and based in continuous improvement, we have invited a new panel of subject matter experts to help facilitate through conversations, and we've turned this into a 2-part workshop. So I'm going to spend the next 9 minutes or so giving you an overview and setting the tone of why we're here, and then we'll jump into some data. So if the slides will advance.
They will.
They will. Carrie says they will. I did. Okay. All right. So here's our timeline. We're in session 1 right now, and session 1 is going to be like a sit and get. If you are familiar with the Lucy Culkin's workshop model, consider this a very long series of mini lessons. And then in session 2, after your popcorn and soda break, that's when you'll actually do the workshopping and the problem solving. So we do have some interactive slides in here for you to pause and reflect in between the data elements, but that's generally how we have this planned, and we would love it for you to stay for both. We understand if you want to get home before dark, but part 2 is where you get to kind of get your hands in the dirt. I'm going to give you the 6 W's, right? The who, what, when, where, why, and how. Why are we hosting this session? We know that teachers are the #1 school-based factor for student outcomes, positive and negative. We know that leadership positions are the #2 school-based factor for student outcomes. And we also know that Wisconsin has held for a very, very long time one of the worst positions for school outcomes when it comes to racial disparities and other subgroups. So there's correlational data and there's causational data, right? Like, ice cream sales increase in July, and so do deaths by drowning. People don't drown to death because they eat more ice cream, and people don't eat more ice cream in July because people are drowning, right? They go along with each other, but one doesn't cause the other. So as we're presenting this data, we're not stating whether they're correlational or causational. We're just saying they're connected, right? And dairy-free, yes. I am not an expert. I don't know enough about this to claim any such thing, but I do feel very strongly that it is important that we give this topic time, that we give it a space, and that we give it the attention that it deserves so that changes can get made across the state of Wisconsin. We have a panel. The WHO is a panel of DPI staff. They will introduce themselves as they come up and present themselves to you. Oops, I'm still on the side. Sorry. Oh, what did I do? Kina. Okay. The what is the data elements. This collection of data elements is not the right slide. I'm getting all my mistakes out right away. These are the data elements that we will be presenting to you. We are presenting on these data elements because they highlight the students' categories. They highlight the categories of students that fall into those disproportionate outcome gaps. Students in these categories are also frequently underrepresented in data and align with historically marginalized groups. We understand that Wisconsin is a local control state. We are not here to tell you what you must do. We are here to provide you with opportunities of what you could do. How are we going to discuss these topics? We are going to do this on 2 levels. One is personal and one is more systematic. The systematic is what we'll talk about more in session 2. On the personal level, we're going to do this by using the 4 agreements. The 4 agreements are to stay engaged. So try not to tune out. If you need to pinch yourself or drink some water, do what you need to. We have offered those little in-between slides between data elements to give you that mental headspace to re-engage. We want you to speak your truth. We don't want you to share a story about someone you know. We want you to speak from your own experiences, from your own perspective. That might cause you to experience some discomfort. That's part of this process. We're talking about an uncomfortable thing. So it's natural that we're going to feel uncomfortable at times. That's part of it. Go with it. And we want you to both accept and expect that we're not going to get all the answers answered today. We're going to ask a lot of questions, and we hope that those questions get carried back to your agencies and that the conversations continue within your agencies. This is the when. When you use the 4 agreements, that's now, right? That's in this session and in session 2. We're going to ask you to use your personal perspective. Come to the data personally when you get there. When we are talking about educational equity, that's more of the systematic view that we're going to view in session 2. And hopefully that's when you guys will get, and gals and people will get to start inventing creative solutions that you see within your own data. This slide covers the where. The where is the data. Use the student data as your initial resource. See it, think about it, talk about it. We're going to use these 5 lenses more focused in session 2 because they'll give you a specific lens that you can view the data through. And we'll also get a new reason why in session 2, and that why is, why does my data look this way? The last slide that I have for the introduction is the turn and talk. Some of you have your 6-foot distance. That's okay. If you don't want to turn and talk, then we invite you to stop and jot. On a sticky note, we have some of those little Kalahari notepads up here, or they're outside the door. If you want to jot things down, things that you notice, things that make you go, ooh, you know, any kind of mental reaction or emotional reaction that you're having, we ask you to collect that. And also, if it's feedback that you would directly like to give to DPI, to jot that down. At the very end of the presentation, there'll be a QR code. It's also, however, on the back of your badge to lead you to the evaluation form. And we really like your feedback on this session and what you would like to see from DPI about topics such as this. Knowing that the whole second session is going to be a lot of interactive and a lot of time for you to talk, to keep ourselves on track, we're going to try to limit these stop and jot slides to somewhere between 2 and 4 minutes so that we can respect your time. Yeah, that's where we're going today. So I'm going to hand it off now to Ananda and Courtney, who are going to dive into our first data element, which is race and ethnicity.
Who's excited to talk about race? All right, thank you, thank you. Some of them are my friends. I was excited about talking about race after lunch. That's a particular special time, right? So what we did, the way that we scaffolded the presentation was to give you all content, to share some data with you all, and then try to capture some opportunities, and then of course, give you all some time to debrief. You saw it, there are like 12 items, 12 data points. Most of them will have sort of this thread, I mean, actually all of them will have this thread of disproportionality, racial inequities, over-identification, over-representation, under-identification. So you see some of this thread, and that's why we're highlighting them. We don't expect you all to come out of this like, oh, we know all of the 12 ones. But what you will see is that there'll be enough content and resources in the slides, and that's how we prepared this. Another pop quiz for you all. How many of you have felt confused or inadequate when you were trying to look at your race or ethnicity data? Okay, so this is that. Great, and I raised my hand too because it is confusing. So we're going to try to demystify. But what is important for our time today is to really share with y'all that within all the complexities of the things that we're going to be discussing, is like, here's what DPI is going to be looking at, and here's some of the liberties that we have used within our agency that we wanted to model for you all. You all can choose to take it or not, but know what is going to be required.
Hey, Amanda, can I do another pop quiz?
Yes, please.
Okay, so would love to see what roles are you all playing so that we know where, so that we can guess where the discomfort might be. So how many folks are responsible for data collection, meaning talking to families and putting information into your student information? Okay. How many folks are using the data? Meaning you might be at central office, you might be at the school, but you're using data to make decisions. Awesome. So that is super helpful. Go for it.
No, thank you. So what
Wait, I have one more pop question. Okay. So, someone share with me, just shout out, what brought you into this room today after lunch?
Perkins.
Perkins. Okay, special pops and Perkins in particular. Thank you for that.
Somebody from the side.
I would say, actually, this lady beside me, we kind of talked about it at lunch for breakfast, one of the times we met. And right before 2020 hit, my superintendent was talking about this and said, we need to look into this. Then 2020 happened and then he had medical issues and left, and we finally have a new superintendent. So I thought, she's looking into it. I know mine's gonna ask me about it. That's why I'm here.
You're preparing yourself.
I am.
I appreciate this session. For your have to say, when I was listening to your specific words, I was thinking about how the state of Wisconsin is seeing our districts and the over-identifications, under-identifications, and the issues in the system, and the inequality in testing. But there'll be a lot of them. Right. Anybody else?
And I'm happy to share what brought me here. So. I want to share that. I certainly have worked for PPI for 25 years. And then Ananda and I both have been on the school board and just really grappling with this from the perspective of how do we ensure that our investment that our taxpayers are making are being received by students so that they are all accessing outcomes that we want. So that there's not predictable patterns of kids who succeed and kids who fail when we're using taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I would say about me and why I'm bringing to the space is that, for most of my daughter, for all my daughter, career in K-12, I saw her in the data. I saw her in the data as an EL student. I saw her in the data as a Latina student. I saw her in the data as a student that qualified for free reduced lunch. So many of the data points that you see today is something that was personal to me, and that's why we're here today. So thank you all for being in our session. We'll try to make this as fun as possible, but it's heavy and there's a lot of slides, you all. So let's just get to it. So what feels important to highlight in this slide in particular is that this is data that DPI requires. This is data that the Office of Student Rights is going to be looking at in order to ensure that we're following the laws, the districts are following the laws, that organizations, the institutions, educational institutions are following the law. And then those reports are required for eligibility and accountability. So next, oh, there it is. This is that slide that's going to be like, wait, what are we talking about? So now when we talk about race, we're talking about Asia, which is a continent, and we're talking about American Indian or Alaskan Native, which kind of somewhat no, but there's also other terms that we have used like Native American or Indigenous, Black or African American. So we have a color of skin and an ethnicity. We have Native Hawaiian, which, okay, I'm making association. This is Native people that were born in Hawaii, and other Pacific Islanders. So there's some islands in the Pacific, and that's where those people are from. And then white was a color of skin. How does that make sense? So we're comparing that, right? This is our first place of descent, confusion, complexity, right? And, so, and then we're gonna move to ethnicity. And then after you complete the race part, which we already kind of established that the items to choose from are not necessarily in alignment or equal or comparable, we're gonna ask, is this a Hispanic or white kid? And then we're like, wait, what is happening now, right? And so I see many forums asking, what's your race? And then asks like Latino, and then I say like, Latino is not a race. And then they're like, wait, what is Latino? It's an ethnicity. What other, so you see how this is complicated? Okay. So we're here to say, we could just spend the whole day just in this slide alone, and then we don't have it. We're here to say, here's the complexities of the race and ethnicity components. Here's how DPI reports. And also what is important about it, Carrie, you might just go back to say like, so if your district or people or the families and students that you serve identify themselves as Black, that's how you want to refer to them. If they identify themselves as African American, that's how they're identified. That's how you want to refer to them. If they identify as minority, that's how you want to, talk and speak to them. I have my preference. I'm a Latina, or I'm part of the Latinx community. So that's how I like to identify. I have colleagues that identify themselves as Hispanics. I don't have any. Whatever. Do whatever you all want to. But it's important to ask those questions. And then the next slide is going to say, here's how DPI asks those questions. So Hispanic or Latino, neither are me. They don't represent me. That I'm not a Latino. Latino is for males. And I'm also not Hispanic. My country, I'm from Brazil. My country is not part of the Hispanic colonization. So that doesn't mean that's not me. But when I'm filling out for my daughter, I just put a little A in there, and then I just put her name in there. So that's how I do it. It's similar to when we're talking about American Indian. There are so many nations across the state and across the country, and they're not necessarily represented there. And what's not represented there, and Carrie, you can continue to move on, is language, right? So each person is speaking different language. So when my daughter was in kindergarten, I put her in a dual language school, and because she looks Latina, they start speaking to her in what language? Spanish. And then, but my daughter did not know Spanish because she learns and we're speaking Brazilian Portuguese. So guess what assessment that she do? What language assessment that she do? Back to our friend here, Spanish assessment. So my daughter understood nothing of the assessment and traumatized her forever. She would speak about this. But let's talk a little bit about the data.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that Ananda just modeled, which I want to invite folks to say, is that when you're talking to families, it's okay to say, it makes no sense. This data collection uses words that we don't use in our everyday ways of talking about ourselves. And at the same time, I want to honor how we want to be put into boxes that neither of us came up with, and ask them to help you figure out how to do it. So it can be a really uncomfortable, and I think that just owning that for all of us, it makes no sense. And go ahead and let's see if you want to get into a place that makes a little bit more sense for you. I want to honor that for you as a family. So here's the slide. And basically what I want folks to take away from this slide is that there is a very predictable pattern of success and failure that's based on race in Wisconsin. And it is a pattern that we've done a lot of work at DPI to look at the data. And it is a pattern that is not about poverty. It's not about kids in Milwaukee. It is when we hold steady for class, when we hold steady across the state, you see a pattern where white students are always at the top if it's a good educational outcome. So if you're graduating or proficient and above on state performance, you're going to see white students up there. And then at the bottom, you're going to see Black students and Native American students. And that's the typical pattern that you're going to see. So number one, the takeaway is, please remember, it's about race, it's not about poverty. And the second thing is that we have racial diversity all across Wisconsin. It's not just Milwaukee. It's not just Madison, it's not just around Paper Valley or clustered outside of Minneapolis, but that we have we have students of all races across the state. So we go on. And we know what works. We know what works to close gaps between student groups when we look at race. And we know that it means not being colorblind. It means being really careful and specific about which students need acceleration. And we know that programs in particular, like tutoring or mentoring, and in particular, when you're looking at Perkins and you're looking at both participation and completion, we know that mentoring and peer groups are part of the two most important strategies that you can implement. All right, so
Courtney, hold on a second, just check, how far behind are we? Okay, okay. Oh, can we just model real quick the other terms, because, two or more race, have you all seen that? We use multiracial, and so when we're writing reports, we say multiracial kids, factually recognized as two or more race. The same we do, like, you know, for writing a report, and they're saying like 40% Hispanics, that's the federally recognized term, we use Latinx. The same with Native American or American Indian students, I use Indigenous students, federally recognized as Native American. Okay, we gave you a ton to chew on. So let's get some, y'all wanna talk? With another person?
no,
No?
I think it's
Oh, I see that here. Somebody wants to talk. Sorry. I know, I recognize you right away. All right, do you wanna come and talk to Carl? He likes to talk to. Do you have somebody to talk to? Can you talk to the friend there? Yeah, okay. How much time do you wanna give, like 2 minutes?
So 2 minutes, yeah.
And then what are they talking about?
Race and ethnicity data, things they notice in their own agency.
Share what's coming up already for you all. How are you navigating the space of race and ethnicity identification in from the place of workplace?
And in specific, think about the conversations that you're having with families when you're collecting this data, maybe ways that we can improve, maybe nuances that you can take away from our conversations that you can take back to your schools.
We'll take all the feedback to specifically the feedback that says we need to make sure that we're centered to the events. Right,
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Oh, yes.
You have to look at us. Yes, you do excellent. Oh my gosh. Right on time. Right on time. Yes. And then next. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. All the stuff I did earlier. Coming the time. I did not get one. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 1 minute. Perfect. The orders. Now I know who gets there. Yeah. That was. And second countdown. Thank you, partner.
I love the energy of the room. We started cold and we're getting warmed up. So there was a colleague of ours that was asking, so those terminologies, we're still trying to wrap our minds around this terminology. We're here to say like, yes, they're confusing and they are making your students, they have a possibility to make your students and your families be able to be seen, be acknowledged, understands that there's differences between us and how we show up. There's different in the pedagogical aspect and difference in the way that you are supporting depending on different programs. So it is important to know that there's a Latinx student that also is going to be an English learner, right? They're not always the same. But that it might be an identification for you. So it's important for you to know that. And there are other programs, for example, we're going to talk a little later for Indigenous students that can support students. So it's important to know, like, wait, I know that there's at least one student or a couple of students from this nation here, but I don't see them in the data. So they might be hidden into multiracial students. They might be hidden on other ethnicities, so they might be hidden on white students. I know, so I worked for the Madison School District when, actually, just remember my colleague David and I, who some of us know, we're looking at our like deep into like how my daughter was identifying. And when, remember I was telling the story, so I've been in the district, I added the multiracial box for her, and I added Latina, all of that stuff. Then whoever was typing was like, nope, this person was like messing up with our form and then marked my daughter white. That's very, very, very common. A lot of Latina kids are marked as white. So now when you're trying to create a program for Latina children, right, with oftentimes they are English learners or immigrants or descendants of immigrants, a very targeted program, you don't know because you marked them all white. So the part of the conversation was, how would I know? So that's where we're here, right? So if there's limitation about like, I needed more point of contact with my families, I need to have a specific meetings with the teachers so that they can also be equipped to know some of this, to help us do some of the work, to identify. I have a colleague who was Menominee, and one of the part of her work for a long time was to go to schools and have some of this conversation so they can identify who are the Menominee kids in the school so they can participate in the program. You see how that needs to come to the space, those conversations need to come to the space. Courtney, what else would you add?
Yeah, the other thing that came up for me when I was talking to folks during this turn and talk was that
I think it's off.
the point of the point where I just have a really soft voice. So the other piece that came up is that the point where school staff oh, there you go, it's about turning it on. The point at which where school staff start to wonder, like, okay, maybe we need more support for families to be able to give us information, happens often after you get the data collection, right? So it's like, okay, and Ananda, you said this as well, it's like the families may have checked a box or checked information that just doesn't square with your experience, but then how are we equipped to have the conversation around in the moment, like, wait, okay, I'm a little confused because this doesn't square with what I know about you in terms of language that you would have checked this particular box. And how do we back up far enough so that families have enough information and it's not just the click boxes. So in my district being Skyward, and there's very little support for me once I hit the race ethnicity space on Skyward as a parent for information. So if I don't exactly know what that looks like, are there videos or other supports as a family that I can access so that I'm giving accurate information as well?
It's a perfect segue to this next space that we're gonna get into, which is ancestry and ethnic origins. If anybody had asked me or my daughter, what's our ancestry and origins, they would know that that's not the language, right? The language does not match. And then you can see here that Hispanics, Latinx, Black or African Americans and Asian students are those identities that have the most complexities in regards to ethnicity and language. So you may classify all the students as Black and African American, but many of them are not, they don't identify as African American because that's a US ethnicity. And many of them are English learners because they're the first, second generation Somalians. Wisconsin is a large place largely receives refugees and folks transitioning from different programs and settling in Wisconsin. So we have a large Somali population, we have a large Hmong population, we have a large Iraqi population. So and this is going to continue, right? You know, because of different reasons, Wisconsin is sort of this fertile ground to receive and welcome students from different parts of the world. And so it becomes even more important when we're talking about ancestry. Just one more thing here, Carrie, one second, just make sure that I cover. And then the educational research and evaluation. So if you're not capturing, like, so if you don't know that you have Somali students, how are you ensuring that they are welcoming in your communities? And then lastly, you know, being able to provide the target programs and supports for students.
So
And then, oh yeah, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say that those things further like, so through data, you can make a student be welcome or further marginalize them.
So this data, this optional data element came as a request from the community. So we had, as another reference, we had Hmong communities and Somali communities from all across the state saying, we want to know how students who have come to the US as refugees from Laos, we want to know how they fare because they're wrapped into they're wrapped into the category of Asian students, and we have a hunch that they're probably not doing as well as that population is being masked. And so, and we also got an ask because there are a lot of supports, including foundational or community fund supports that would support in particular Somali or Hmong communities or projects. And school districts didn't have the data to be able to write to those grant opportunities. So using this optional data collection at the local level, if you think that you have a large population, in particular of Hmong students, Somali students, or you're interested in knowing more, would be the way that this optional data element could be really useful.
I'll give you an example before I get to this next slide. So this happened in Madison. We knew that it was a large Hmong population, but they were like, we couldn't see them in the data because they were lumped with the Asian. There were some hypotheses that what was happening to Asian students, they like largely in the data setting, English language proficiency or attendance or socioeconomic status. So the other data that were some of the other data that we're going to be speaking to were not directly representing Hmong students. So we did a very comprehensive study and work with the Hmong community to really identify using lots of different methodologies and to identify who were the Hmong families. And because of that work, we were able to offer a language immersion program for Hmong students, for students that speak Hmong. And so we have now programs, dual language immersion programs in Hmong because of that language effort. So here's that really lovely question that we get specifically for people that look like me. Is this student Hispanic or Latino? Yes or no? Oh, yes. Okay, I'll say yes. And then select one or more of the following categories that apply to this person. And then there's all this complicated continent, color, ethnicity question that it goes. And although they're complicated, at this point in 2024, this is what we're advocating for. Let's try to be as accurate as we can. that means that I myself would say, okay, Nanda, you're Latina, come over here, go see who are Latino in that. That's not the way, right? Go to the parents, go to the family, or go to the student. It's like, how do you identify yourself? Hey, we want to make sure that we are capturing your race and ethnicity classification. This classification is particularly challenging for newcomers. So if you have a lot of newcomers, meaning a lot of students and families not from Wisconsin or not from this country, it makes even less sense because all of this that we're talking about is only in the US. Everywhere else, you go to Mexico is something else, in Brazil is something else, in Somalia is something else. So, you know, you may need to do this for like a couple of years to make sure that you have, or 2-3 years to make sure you have the most accurate data. Let me know, Carrie, if you know, if there's anything else you want.
5 minutes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Done. So here's some other ethnic origins for some of our Hispanic, Latinx, Latina students, and then for our Asian students. And here's why it's important, right? We're talking, all this list here are like different cultures, different languages. Even if like all this language speak Spanish, their Spanish is different. They have a different context, different language set up, different culture. You can keep going. And this is for the list for Black and African Americans, right?
And I do want to add that we piloted this from the work that's happening in Minnesota. So Minnesota is doing something very similar around ancestry, ethnic origins. They were doing it because of a state statute. And we borrowed a lot of the framework from our data collection from Minnesota. And so that's why we only collect in those 3 areas. We only expand in selected racial categories expand, but we don't get we don't ask for ethnicity data for all races.
And this is a good segue to this last slide that's going to say, we are early stages of our work that we still don't know. And by the time we get a little bit ahead, our population is going to change because Wisconsin population is changing dramatically. So we need you all to be writing this, leave us some notes. We won't tell you that that was you and say like, hey, we need to do better. And this is what I needed to see improved and better, and, you know, more comprehensive to make sure that we're seeing our students and families. See what else we want to say about the slides. This is it, right? Is there anything else?
Is it working?
No, it's not.
Is it working? Is it working?
No.
Okay, so ideally, with this generation of this data collection, we would like some accountability in addition at the state level. We would like to see after the school districts are compiling their data, after a few years, our state should be responsible in reflecting what's happening within our state, right? And so ideally, after this data collection is off of kind of a piloting piece, that we could generate reports and we could show the public what is happening within the demographics and dynamics at these granular levels with the achievement of our students and with the programming that we're generating from this data. So we are asking for your participation because it's not going to go anywhere if we don't have data to use.
We have we're gonna give you all 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes to turn to your colleague. And like, what's coming up for you all? What's coming up around ethnicity, ancestry,
Ethnic origins.
and what feedback you want to share with you guys? 2 minutes.
Thank you. This working for me. I don't know if we can unplug it and plug it back in. Oh, Kina, should we call the number
Why?
to get another microphone?
Yes.
Me.
And then after that.
No, I'll just put it here.
Then Christina and Sam.
When you start, Carrie, I'll reset the timer and I'll.
Okay. Hi.
50 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let me write down your contact information.
Because,
Can you write it for me?
yeah, we're.
Thank you.
Obviously, it's diverse.
Awesome. Yes, we would love that. We would love to have communication with you and just kind of
Scary.
keep this conversation going.
Show me what you're talking about. Let's go forward test. Yes. And then they treat it like Spanish. And I have middle school students that have no idea what cranberry is because.
That's
Spanish.
beautiful. Oh, that is a great example. Yes. That's so valid.
As if they're not comfortable, like I understand people that live in homes that are, that identify as white, because they don't want that label. So it's a cultural shift, we need to, how do we make them feel, yeah, cross, that they can identify. That's okay.
So, thank you so much, Janet, for sharing that. Two things that came up for me. One is, are we asking all students, if we are all students, are you asking all of us? Or are you asking myself, or two, two of us a little, you know?
Mhm.
So now we're asking everyone, we engage in that conversation with everyone. And the second piece, which is most important, is like building those relationships. And it can be really challenging because it's a new family coming in or they're just arriving in the class. So thank you, please just write it down. We need deeper family engagement support. Really need you to be part of us better capture our data. Anybody else?
Well, I'm going to share the conversation that I just had with Abbotsford School District. With the forward exam, our state examination, we're asking students that are not Wisconsin natives, we're asking questions about cranberry bogs. If you haven't lived in Wisconsin your entire life, do you know any context about cranberry bogs? Maybe if you come from like Ireland, right? The terrain there, Northern Europe. So, I mean, just thinking about these nuances, why would we measure student success on their knowledge of native Wisconsin terrain? Great conversations happening. We appreciate you. Next data element that we want to discuss is tribal affiliations. This is a new data collection. And it is not currently required, but we are in state legislature right now having those conversations to have the data element required. And the reason that this is important is because our American Indian communities are essentially known as the asterisk nation. They are completely underreported and underserved in not only education, but when we look at crime reports and crime reporting, when we look at just general census information, they're invisible. And so we want to drive our school community, have that culturally responsive teaching. We want to see our students in the nation that they hail from, right? Because that's very important to them and their family dynamic. We want to revisit the curriculum that we're teaching. Raise your hand if you've read Laura Ingalls Wilder because it was in your 4th grade curriculum. How are American Indian students portrayed by Laura? I was a 4th grade teacher reading that, and I was a terrible teacher and didn't read the text prior, okay? And I'm reading it to my 4th grade students, and I stopped. I got hot. My stomach got sick. Because how would my student feel being portrayed as a terrible, murderous, criminal savage? Because that's the text that Wisconsin State tells me that I need to teach. Maybe we can revisit that, huh? Let's revisit our curriculum. Think about who's in your classroom community and how we can honor and include and make our students feel welcome so that they can really engage in their learning. With this data point, we have our Wisconsin tribes defined here. We do have an asterisk next to Brothertown, not because they're visible, but because they're not federally or state recognized, what they call Wisconsin home. And so essentially from this data collection, we want to make data-driven decisions at the local level, but also as a state agency, we need to develop, test, and demonstrate the effectiveness of services and programs to improve the educational achievements of American Indian children. We want your data. We want this data. So please participate. Please give this data collection an opportunity. Our SIS vendors, I work with our vendor manager. They have built this into the SIS. It's there. And so if you need to have conversations with parents on how to navigate that, we can help you have those conversations. We want the data to be accurate, and we want you to feel comfortable and confident in having these conversations. We consistently get phone calls and emails in distress from, a lot of times it's the administrative assistant who's having these conversations, and they're ill-equipped. They're literally running the school, they're the school nurse, right? They're doing everything for every teacher and their administrator. And then on top of it, they have to have this nuanced, intimate conversation with families on what they identify with. Completely understandable for them to be in distress. Another dynamic is that many of our students are not comfortable in sharing their race, ethnicity because of political turmoil. They don't feel safe. So all of these are kind of landing on our administrative or front office staff, and then our data is not collected or not accurate. So this graph is showing our enrollment by tribal affiliation here in our state as of 2022-23, pulling this from WISE- Public. In our next session, teaser, get excited. In our next session, we're going to talk about WISE- and how we can retrieve this data so that you can look at your own local data, be there or be squared. And then the purpose of this data collection, we want to build college and career readiness, right, for all of our students. But also, as Courtney had mentioned, our students who are Black and American Indian are often on the bottom of our academic performance. And we're going to change that. And we're going to do that by making data-driven decisions, improving our programming, improving our curriculum so that when we are reading our text, our students don't feel ostracized and uncomfortable. We have a lot of areas of growth. One of the issues with our current state data collection with the 5 big federal categories is if our student identifies as 2 or more races, they're invisible. There's an absence of data. So they would, for the student to show up with those 5 big categories, they have to only report Hispanic. No. Is that common? No. A lot of our folks that are coming from the South are not necessarily Hispanic, but maybe Latina, Latino, and also Indigenous, right? Right. And so they're already hidden. If they mark yes, they're already hidden. So for a student to populate within this category as American Indian, they would have to say Hispanic, no, and then American Indian, Alaskan Native. So already, just the current data collection, it's hard to dissect and pull out, and that's why we're asking, as Ananda had spoke to, that ethnicity, ancestry, ethnic origin, that you're pulling that out. But also we're indicating the Wisconsin and tribes through our tribal affiliation. Another thing that we want to do, as we discussed, is we need to break the stereotypes and cultural omissions that are happening with our tribal communities and our American Indian students. We need to build our historical and current awareness of what's happening within our communities. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I shamefully report to you, I was ignorant. And I still am, but I'm growing, I'm working. We can all be in this uncomfortable place of not knowing, right? And so sometimes we hold stereotypes that we're not even aware of, and we're gonna work at omitting those and breaking those and having conversations and engaging families and welcoming families and our students. All right, so with that being said, we're just going to quickly touch base on the 6 Indigenous languages of Wisconsin. This was brought to us from the World Language Education Program. And there are 6 Indigenous languages spoken by the 11 federally recognized American Indian nations in our state. They used to be collected under an umbrella term. Shocker, they used to be hidden. But now we do have this dissected and broken apart so that we can see the tribal community's language. And the language is so sensitive. Language is so important. We close to eradicated many tribal communities' languages. And so we need to do our due diligence to report and advocate for these languages to be celebrated, to be spoken and recognized. And so through this data collection, we can do that. So,
I'm sorry, me too. Sound full out. The languages that you see on the screen are the languages of the nations that are represented in the state of Wisconsin, right? The nations of the state of Wisconsin. There are many other indigenous languages from indigenous people from all over the US and all over the world that come here and then resident here, but those are the identified languages of the nations, of the primary nations of the state of Wisconsin.
yes. Okay, so now's your time. I want you to reflect on your own experience just with our tribal communities here in Wisconsin, or if you're from out of Wisconsin, throughout the nation. But also, what conversations are happening, or what conversations could happen to collect the information on what tribal communities, your American Indian students are recognizing, but also extending that. And then what? Once you have the data, what can you do with it? And that's what we're going to discuss further. But go ahead, stop and drop. We'll give you 3 minutes. Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate you. That's true. You love your data.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 Very honest. Yes. Very. Agreed.
Historically, we can't deny.
We are gonna play it back in. And we're, I guess, what kind of came up from you guys in this discussion about conditions?
I just want to say, if you're gonna collect this data, I'm in a district, I've been shown, we have a lot of Native American students. If you're gonna collect ancestry data, you need to allow to collect more than one ancestry.
Yeah.
I know.
I have tons of people, and I've been using indigenous or First Nations, that's what they like, we use those terms.
Yeah.
Our First Nations parents they come from multiple tribes, but
Nation.
Multiple nation.
right, multiple nations, so you have that. So if you're gonna collect this data to try to improve that, you need to be able to allow WISE to be able to collect multiple.
Select all that apply.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they marry a Brazilian, they're like, oh my.
And, you know, and I know, and I'm gonna say this, I invested this one time, I just like the races. And yes, it's things, I wish we just did ancestry, because it alienates parents. It alienates people when you have to ask those questions, as much as you try to be, try to be as delicate in those situations. And I feel a lot of times that, and I'm gonna say it this way, in a previous district I was in, which was Lily White, we had one Black student in my son's class. I couldn't even report the data
Right.
to post anywhere, because I have one Black student in that grade level. You can identify who that is on all the reports,
Yeah.
you know, so. That's just my pet peeve. I wish we could get away from that, because you label kids, or you hear people say, oh, it's the Black kid. No, it's supposed to be Bob. You know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
Shouldn't be that.
Thank you.
So
And
I
that's
hope they make that, I hope you guys can get that change made.
Yeah.
That's all, that would be my big,
And that classroom with one Black student is changing.
right. It is changing.
Thank you.
You know, it's just the way our whole society is.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, so we're moving to the migrant education program, which is Title I, Part C of ESSA. We'll get into it a little bit later about the differences between migrant and immigrants. But for the case in Title I, Part C, when we were talking about migratory kids, we're talking about kids that come from temporary and seasonal agriculture workers and their families. So either like a secondary student that works at a local dairy farm, that may not necessarily be in school all the time, or a kid in central Wisconsin that comes up with their family from Texas and works in the potato fields over the summer. So it's really important that we identify these students. So with this program in particular, determination of eligibility is done at the state level. Then we really rely on districts to refer those students to us in the first place. I know, how many of you guys know if you have migratory students in your district? A handful, awesome. So moving on to the next slide. So I know some of you, I've recognized some of you guys from meetings and stuff, but that referral to is really important. So some trends in the data over the last couple of years, again, since we are such, like it's, the feds have us so defined in what a migratory student is. Our numbers have been kind of all over the place lately. You can kind of see, you know, the trends over the last about 10 years. There was that dip in 2020 during COVID, when a lot of families stayed put in the states that they were from. So a lot of families stayed back in Texas or Florida, and then we're on the rise again. So category 1 numbers are the total number of students identified. Category 2s are the students that are actually served. So Wisconsin is a summer only program. So our majority of our services take place during the summer, because that's when a lot of our families are here. So we have a lot of, like I said, we have a lot of families that work in seasonal. They can live here from Texas, majority come from Texas or Florida or California. They harvest potatoes, green beans, work in the canneries. And then, so they're here from like April through like October, and then they move back down to Texas, wherever home state they came from. Really important thing to kind of note here too, in terms of like ethnicity, is that nationally 90% of migratory children are Latino origin, and only 34% are EL, which Christina and I were talking about the other day is really interesting in the fact that like we've talked about a lot of our families, and it's the big difference between immigrant and migrant is that they don't have to come from out of the country. So there are a lot of English speakers in the migratory program. So that I will pass it out to Christina.
Thanks, Sam. All right, so migratory students are eligible for different services, including free lunch in the regular school year and also in summer meal programs. They're eligible for Title I Part A services, and those funds can be reserved by school districts ahead of time if they know that they're going to have migratory children there that they can set aside funds for. And then what we do at the state level is we coordinate the migrant education program. It's a summer program. This is my 8th week. So bear with me as I talk to you about something I'm very new to. So what we like to do with the migrant education program is provide literacy and mathematics instruction, credit recovery and accrual, and then provide family engagement opportunities. One thing that's really important to know here is that we are a supplementary program. We are not a summer school program. We're not childcare. There are other services around the state that provide that, like Migrant Child Care Program and the UMOS Head Start. But we are really trying to just give migratory children an extra boost. Next. And that's because our students come with have to face a lot of different barriers. They're experiencing language barriers, social isolation from constantly being on the move and being in transition, poor housing, not enough access to medical care, food, pests, and all different kinds of barriers that prevent them from engaging fully in the school, in their school experience. And so what can staff around the state do when it comes to migratory children? They can grow in their awareness of the difference between migrant and immigrant. This is a really important distinction because not all migrant children are immigrants and not all immigrants are migrants. And so knowing the definition, the federal definition of those is going to be really helpful so you can figure out how to best serve your students. Also, for students to qualify for this program, they need their parents or they themselves, depending on their age, have to be engaged in seasonal and temporary agricultural work. We provide services for children 3 to 22, or 3 to 21, under 22. If they're already out of school, but they have not completed schooling, they're eligible for services with us up to the age of 21. And then know how to find your migrant children on WISE and this just came up in the last conversation, but how to identify those children and use cultural sensitivity without stereotyping. And think about that when in your enrollment processes. 3 questions that can really help you in this order. Have you worked in agriculture? Was your work temporary or seasonal? And have you moved in the last 36 months? These 3 questions can help you identify if a student would be eligible for our program and therefore need to be referred using the referral tool. All right, so we're down to the thinking part.
While you're thinking, some things that you could think about. We talked about credit accrual. The reason that we have that the supplemental program is because when our students are leaving in October, what happens with the forward exam? Okay, in Texas, if they live in Texas, they take something called the STAR, it's double R, double A, STAR, double R. And, they have to pass that assessment to go on to the next grade level. So we often have our migrant students who are in the 5th grade or should be in the 7th. Because they had to leave before the start. Double R. Okay, so think about, as a Wisconsin school, how can we improve that process? So when in Stevens Point, we had a large, we still do have a large migrant population because of the Del Monte cannery. And the agricultural work there. And so because I was in the migrant program and I was in the know, I would begin calling my high school students' districts to ask for transcripts, because when the migrant program started, everyone was gone. And we couldn't get transcripts and we didn't know what classes they needed. So if you have migrant students in your enrollment, think about how to have that interstate communication, given that that district they call, say, hey, I have this student, this is where they're at. What classes do they need? And the migrant program, with Sam and Christina, they can order the STAR assessment and we can actually proctor that assessment during the summer so that we can advance grade levels. So all these things that we kind of don't know, but you know now. These are delicate conversations, as we had discussed, you know, the current political climate, it's an election year. Is it? It's an election year. And it's very understandable that our families, as we had heard, one of the folks here said, you know, they mark white and they're not white because they don't want their student to be called out. They don't want their student to be treated differently. And that data unfortunately doesn't reflect their true origin and heritage, so that we could, at the state level, make data-driven decisions. But this is a sensitive conversation. It's understandable.
If there is any part of this presentation now, today, or later, that you say like, you know, this is our district, our educational institution is really struggling with this. You can call or reach out, email, phone call, any of us, and then we'll get you connected. Earlier on, you mentioned the local control, you all can do, you know, this is our recommendations, this is our best recommendations. So we wait for you all to say, hey, we have this issue. And then to be able to be swap partners with you all.
Okay, we are going to speak on immigrant status. The content expert, Amy Michelik, couldn't be here today, and so you get me. And I do want to say that Amy has open office hours. She works as a consultant at DPI and is happy to discuss, I'm going to discuss with you today, immigrant status and EL, and those are both Amy's passions, because that's what she works with. So you certainly, if you have follow-up questions today, we want you to join those open office hours. I can find that resource and share that with you. But essentially, for a student to be identified as immigrant, different than migrant, they can be age 3 through 21. We don't do EL testing for students before the age of 5. But immigrant identification is different. And they cannot be born in the US, in DC or Puerto Rico. We did have a question yesterday about students that were born in Guam, and that's a valid question. I didn't get like a solid answer, but that would also apply to like Virgin Islands, right? Because that's a US territory and so on and so forth. So we're gonna stick with this, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. and they cannot have been in attendance at a US school for less than 3 academic full years, whether consecutive or not. So we do have students that came from Mexico, lived here for a couple months, went back to Mexico, came back a couple months. We're adding those months together for the cumulative 3 years for that immigrant definition. Let's see if I missed anything important. So if we do have a confirmation that the student is immigrant, we want this submitted to WISE data. And it will then display the immigrant value in the student details within WISE data. And essentially, we need a native language code that needs to be submitted as well. And so those go hand in hand with student reporting. This is our data of the Wisconsin demographics for our immigrant students. We can see that we certainly have an uptrend. In the last 5 years, we've had a 52.87% increase. Please do. Correct. The question was, students that are coming from Mexico have not lived here before. What was the other criteria?
Well, just that.
Yep, they haven't been here for 3 years, so they're considered immigrant. Correct.
Yeah, so I've been here for 22 years. I'm an immigrant. So I think, just to clarify, for the context of identification and pastoral and state reporting, that's what those qualifications are for. And it would be, I think it would be comparable to anything else. So, pre-reduced lunch qualifications, English learner qualification, right? I'm an English learner. I don't qualify as an English learner, right, as a student. So I think the way to think about it is that all of those categories will have a criteria in order to qualify. That doesn't mean that it's a person's identity. It's just, this is, this is how they're qualified in order to receive XYZ, or to be able to be eligible for a program, or serve your data completion.
Right, and you know what, I just think we're missing a lot of things.
Tell me more. What are we missing?
I agree. My district.
Oh, you are missing. What's your district? It's
I'm
no,
in trouble.
you know what? That's okay.
No, it's just at work. I'm in Monroe, and the thing is, we have gotten inundated with people and things, and all right, I don't use this as an excuse, but quite frankly, the pandemic just punched up everything.
You got inundated with people?
Well, we have a lot of, our Hispanic population has grown. Our ELL population, which on the good side, we have an ELL teacher in every single building, an ELL aide, and our aides are so good. But I think that, I don't know, I think that circumstances around our things in our district have,
Yeah.
Jenna's
friend, what's your name? What's your name? No, Jenna's friend.
Oh, Emily.
Emily. Yeah. Just take a breath. And I want to normalize, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Most districts are where you are. Population change, population mobility is the thing, is the thing that's happening right now. In the state of Wisconsin and everywhere, because of where we were, we're still a rural state. For us, those changes are dramatic and will continue to go. And it will take time to catch up because, now are you the only person from a row here in the session?
I'm no one.
So then that, you know, is a huge system to change. And what I want to say to you, now you know me, I'm Ananda, you know Courtney, you know Carrie, you know Pina, you know Christina, you know Sam, right? You know all of us to say like, hey, like, I need your card, I need your number, I need support, because our district still needs to do better. And we're gonna do it together. And I really appreciate you, and I appreciate the frustration too, because I see the frustration as wanting to see, there you go, Christina. Well done. And I'll make sure to let your boss know that you don't well, get this probation on the way. This is what, see, I've been here 7 years, I don't know how many business cards, so I don't know why I asked her, because I don't have time.
I like, you know, make corrections on, but this one makes me feel bad. All right, the other stuff, corrections just to correct because I need the data right for the next thing coming, but this one makes me.
I appreciate, because you're talking about humanity, and I really appreciate, I really, really appreciate. We're gonna get it, we're gonna do it together. We're gonna do it together. You got Christina's part.
Because when we give you bad data, then you give us bad data back.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, it's all false, 100%, it's all.
But that's why we're having this conversation, because as a state level, we're setting the precedent and we need to support you in having these conversations and collecting the data accurately and being able to navigate this. Because the schools are fulfilling so many needs on so many levels for our students and families. Great conversations that we're having. When we're talking about students who are enrolling newcomers, we have a very sensitive conversation about immigrant status. A school district personnel should not ask about a child or family citizenship or immigration status. Okay, this is federally recognized. This is a Supreme Court case. We don't ask. Okay, for many reasons, right? But this is something that I want you to be aware of. Think about this when we're security systems in our schools. Some of our security systems, for parents to come in, require an ID. Okay, if you are undocumented and you want your child to enroll and receive a free public education, but you don't have the ID to come in, think about that barrier. And think about, as an educational agency, how we can navigate that.
Carrie, the thing is, like, if you don't know this experience, you won't know.
Correct.
So you think that like asking everybody for an ID makes sense.
Mhm.
And it's not until you learn. So when you learn, you do better. Or you know better, you do better. Like that's really it. You know, my friend here with my heart.
Correct. So I know that's a big idea to navigate. That's kind of, you know, like, well, how do we change things so that our parents can come in with an ID? I don't know, but those are conversations that you need to have and think about. Yes. Okay. Sure. Valid. Raptor system, it requires first, last name and date of birth so that
But
they
we
can,
also take that.
and it also takes IDs. Awesome. Thinking about some of the dynamics with our students who are immigrant and refugee, they are probably in a trauma state in fleeing unsafe territory from their home. They're leaving their home. You know, like folks, I am staying 2 nights in a different bed at the Kalahari and I'm struggling. Okay, I miss my house. Certainly being ready to learn and feeling welcome in, you know, Wisconsin is very segregated. In those rural communities, majority white. you know, we have to use a lot of empathy and we have to really have these delicate conversations of where folks are from and how we can support them. Because we're not going to see academic success without those conversations happening.
I'm interrupting.
Please do.
Hand it to Christina.
Okay.
We're 3 minutes away. Christina, take it away. Oh, sorry, Steve.
Christine.
Oh. You have the last 3 minutes. Okay. Thank you.
Hold on, we're going to
It's
get
either
there.
59 or 64.
59. Are we doing economically disadvantaged or homeless?
And 64.
64.
Okay,
Thank
we're
you.
skipping some data elements because we're pretty far behind on time. So I'm Christina Dulski. I'm the state coordinator for the Education for Homeless Children and Youth Program at DPI. I will do my best to fit it in 3 minutes, but we're going to talk about our students experiencing homelessness. So right now, these are our current numbers. It looks really small right now. We're at about 16,000 students identified as homeless right now for this current school year. Last year, we ended the school year at about 18,500. But what I'm hearing already from districts is they are identifying over right now the number that they ended the school with last year. So we fully anticipate our numbers to be well over 18,000 by the end of the school year. So all districts are required to identify students experiencing homelessness. There's the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which requires that school districts identify students and then provide them services that are intended to remove barriers to their access to education. I'm not going to get into what all of those are, but know that all districts have to be identifying students experiencing homelessness, and all districts have an identified homeless liaison in their LEA who is that person that is responsible for ensuring students are identified. They may have a team of social workers working with families and students in different school buildings, but they do have an identified homeless liaison. So these are our numbers. There's a huge dip because of COVID, where we were not identifying as many students because in-person learning wasn't occurring. But we're back up. I think last year's, the 22-23 data is on here. So as you can see, it's over 18,000. One thing that I really want to point out to you all is that the definition under McKinney-Vento for schools, the definition of homelessness includes students who are sharing the housing of others, which is not typically included in other housing realms. So when we're looking at housing and urban development funded programs, typically those families and those children are not receiving services through HUD because they have a roof over their head. There's not enough funding to serve all of the people that are experiencing homelessness. They're serving and prioritizing those in HUD funded programs who are unsheltered and who don't have a roof over their head. But just want you to know that that is the majority of our students, which is my next slide, in Wisconsin. 76%, I believe, as of last year, are students that are living doubled up and sharing housing of others. So that is a majority of our students experiencing homelessness. They're not reflected necessarily in other housing programs, but it can be for a lot of different reasons. And we already talked about, right, trauma of people moving, leaving their homes. It could be leaving their home country. It could be that they have to move somewhere every couple nights because they're not welcome where they're staying. And so really be thinking about those students and those experiences that they have. We also have unaccompanied homeless youth, which means those students are meet the definition of homeless under McKinney-Vento and are also not in the physical custody of a parent or legal guardian. So a lot of times we think about these students as our older students who might be couch surfing. Maybe they were kicked out of their homes. Maybe they left an unsafe situation, but there also are very young children whose parents are not in the picture for whatever reason and are kind of maybe left with a family member to take care of them, but they're not in the foster care system. It's not an official placement. It's just family will take the student and care for them. So some of the pieces we definitely want districts to be looking at is using data Does anyone use their data on their students experiencing homelessness or look at it? Okay, 2 of you that are left in the room. So this is just a really big piece in general of our students are forgotten or our students are an afterthought. Most often, districts are looking at low income status and then assume that the homeless students are just included in that data. But when we look at student outcomes, our students experiencing homelessness are performing far worse than if we're just looking at economically disadvantaged students. Far, far worse. Our graduation rates are like 65%. So student outcomes are worse for our students experiencing homelessness. Simply just looking at your data and starting conversations within your districts is like the first step and really important. Making sure you're talking to the homeless liaison in your district as they're planning for services that students need. What does the data show to be able to lead to offering more academic services for those students? A lot of it is meeting basic needs, which is also needed, but what academic things can be put into place to support those students? And then really be correctly identifying students as well in your district, understanding that doubled up is homeless under McKinney-Vento is the largest part of our student population of homeless students. And that is homeless and needs to be identified appropriately. Yeah. That's a really good question. So the question was, how do you differentiate doubled up versus multi-generational living? So a lot of times, you didn't bring this up, I'm going to bring this up, so I'm not calling you out. A lot of times, what I hear from districts is, that's a cultural thing. Those families live together and maybe they're immigrants. They were living together in the country they came from. That's just a cultural thing. They're choosing to live together. When the reality is they have nowhere else to go. So it's the homeless liaison asking questions. If you weren't living here, where would you be? Do you have enough income to be affording your own housing? There is no affordable housing anywhere in Wisconsin. Where would you be if you were not living in this situation? Does everyone have a place to sleep? Just because families were living together, maybe in a different country, doesn't mean that we take that culture and put it here. We look at what is it compared to any other student that's living in our school district area. And absolutely, families choose to generationally live together, support each other, save on housing costs, all of that. My neighbor has her grandkids living with her. That was a choice. They're not homeless. Like, absolutely, everyone's taking care of everybody. That absolutely can be the case. But more often than not, the question you asked, again, you didn't ask it. What I hear is, that's a cultural choice. So thinking about why are they living together? And again, we want to look at compared to other students that we have living in our districts. Yeah.
We have a lot of families. Yeah. So like 2 sisters with their children will move in together because they are each other's support system and provide child.
Sure. So then the clarifying question, or the clarification was that sometimes they'll have family members move in together, they have children, maybe it's 2 sisters, and then they support each other, provide childcare. So that would be a question just to ask. If someone's asking that question, great. Absolutely. If I could live with my best friend and raise our 3 kids together, I would love that. That would be helpful for all of us. But then that was a choice. And so those questions just need to be asked of the family. Or is it 2 adults and 5 kids between the 2, but they're in a 2-bedroom apartment? Adequacy is a piece of McKinney-Vento. Is that adequate? So there's a lot of different factors kind of that might come into play there. Okay, any other questions? Are we at time? Okay.
Okay, so we cut this to the wire and we actually had to skip some data elements. What we want to know is if anyone is interested in staying for the second session. We started with a group of 22 and we are now under 11. So we have less than half of what we started with. And some of it's logistic and maybe some of it's other. But if you would like to stay and keep the conversation going, we're happy to give you a break and then come on back. Just tell us what you prefer. Either way, you deserve a break. There's popcorn and soda and chips and pretzels and water and bathrooms out there. So please make yourself comfortable. And if you come back, we'll be here. And if you don't come back, we'll be here.
You too. Yeah. I love working with you. No, I'm so happy that you came today and collaborated with us. I really appreciate it.
Only use comments. This is an amazing session. Feedback and that's before, but
Right.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
And
for
stay
your
Friday.
No, absolutely. Will do.
I'm sorry, I have to go pick up my children from school and.
Yeah.
you're
Right.
happy, but
Yeah.
thank you
Oh my
so much.
goodness.
This is really.
Drive
Yes.
safely.
I
Yes.
will.
Thank you for coming.
It's-
Yeah.
Thankfully, school ends late, so.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you.
I have some great idea, like.
Yeah.
And the way that you put this stuff together, there's so many things that came up for me that I was new learning. New aha. So I feel like there's really. Like I even was thinking about a fishbowl, how do you have a conversation with my family that exists? And then to have someone be like, why this might be an issue,
Yeah.
why people might not want to answer this question.
Yeah, just to move away from the technical. I love it. I wanna I'm telling Courtney, we need to have like an institute, a data institute.
Yeah.
For the educational.
I should have submitted, I almost submitted for the, what was it, MNE or you sent me a forward, upcoming. Madison. You sent me an email about a new session, presentation.
The new institute.
Yeah.
Upcoming institute.
About that. It was MNE or MNOE.
Oh, MN.
That.
Minority students. Achievement hour.
Yeah. Yep. And so I started submitting it and then I never finished.
But I do.
I wish I knew. I would have tried to help you.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
But we'll do for next year. We'll do next year.
Yeah, and I can, I asked my boss because I'm a contractor.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like, right?
Yeah.
Also, it's your boss.
Gabby,
I love
But-
Gabby.
Gabby's great to work with. Just-
Other and then.
They came down with a lot of rules.
Yeah.
Sure. So.
So, and I'm happy to follow.
The ones that don't align with our values, yeah.
Yeah, those ones.
Yeah.
But no, I'm talking about the institutes.
Yeah,
Like this is.
that would be great to
This
have this.
content, not for technical, like we need.
I
to
agree.
reach, Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
It would be great to have.
And
this.
honestly,
I used to, and then now
Oh,
I
you
can't because I can't take it paid.
right.
I have to take it down.
I know.
Right.
But all that to be said, like, I think, and that's okay, because, and just like I'm saying, like, I think this is the prototyping, right? This is the whole, like, you try something, you're like, wait, okay, I want to figure out how to get better. I want, okay,
Get popcorn too. Hold
Yeah.
on. Popcorn, and then like, let's debrief this to those.
yeah. And so I think that's where we are. And people, I mean, the feedback is the content's great. We just have to figure out a different.
We need to distribute it. And then.
I was thinking about it too. I was thinking about like maybe talking to Gabby and Vet and doing something like this should be like